The medical examiner's office is reporting that Jeffrey Epstein's death was in fact a suicide. That is what their report indicates, and they have ruled this a suicide by hanging. And they gave some details into how he did it. So just want to give you guys a warning that there are some graphic details here. But this is what the report allegedly says. He appeared to have tied a bed sheet to the top of a set of bunk beds, then knelt toward the floor with enough force that he broke several bones in his neck. And I just want to remind you all of the story we did yesterday about the specific bones that were fractured in his neck. The thyroid bone was broken, which is an incredibly difficult bone to break by hanging. It's often seen in cases of strangulation, but it isn't impossible. There have been cases in the past where that bone has broken as a result of death or suicide by hanging. I just, based on what we're seeing from this report, I don't know. I find this very suspicious. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, I'm curious why you think that. Yesterday I mentioned the New York's chief medical examiner, Barbara Sampson, has a lot of credibility and has withstood pressure before when most of the government, the cops, et cetera, wanted her to declare that Eric Garner was not choked to death. She wouldn't do it. And here she took a long time to reach this conclusion, and it appears to be an honest and careful medical examiner. I think suicide is certainly possible. I certainly think homicide is possible too. The one thing that is driving me crazy is that they won't say the thing that I'm most curious about. Did you check the tapes, the video of the hallways? It's not complicated, guys. If you're positive that those are the right tapes, and they should have immediately grabbed those tapes and make sure that they had a chain of custody established. Did anyone go into a cell or didn't they? I mean, that's dispositive, almost dispositive in my mind. But no one has mentioned anything about it. What else makes you curious about it, Anna?
So, of course, there's everything leading up to his suicide that I find suspicious. We'll get to those details in just a second. But I can't get past the details of this medical examiner's report because, first of all, he had already tried to commit suicide, right? And so, why are there objects in that cell that he can use to hang himself? Namely the sheet, right?
There's two parts of that. One is he was taken off suicide watch after 6 days, which
only
is
6 days.
Moronic. Again, that's why prisons shouldn't be the first line of defense for people with mental health issues. Anybody who had a mental health background would tell you to keep the suicide watch going, especially since there's so much pressure for that person around testifying, around plea bargain. I mean, Epstein has so much incriminating evidence, and he clearly has the pressure of national, international media that's hanging over him. So of course you would continue to have a suicide watch. That's ludicrous. And the other part of the story, not only the bed sheet, Anna, why is there bunk beds in his room? Why don't you think about the fact it's not only the sheet, there were multiple ways that he could have possibly tried to commit suicide with a bunk bed scenario.
Right.
The Mankiewicz theory is gaining steam. He mentioned this in Old School. That's one of our shows. It's a more casual, super fun one, although we were talking about this case. Anyway, tyt.com/join to become a member, get all of our shows, including Old School. Ben's theory is maybe they set it up in a way that was like crossing their fingers that he commits suicide. Hey, nobody's going to kill him, but make sure that they're not watching him every half hour. Put the most overworked guards there, which they did. A guy on his 5th overtime shift, someone else that was doing mandatory overtime. They didn't check for 3 hours. Make sure you leave the sheets in there. Make sure you don't respond when he's screaming in the morning. Checking on him to see if he's okay or not. Make sure that
take his cellmate out. Cellmate out.
Oh no, that's the most amazing
one.
Yeah,
that was the most bizarre part of the story.
Right.
Why did the cellmate leave? Why were they extricated from the situation?
Normally, you're supposed to have a cellmate if you're under any kind of suicide watch or there's any potential of that. And then you leave the bunk bed in there. I mean, if someone tried to commit suicide, the very last thing I would have in there is bed sheets and a bunk bed.
Right, exactly. And then also, I can't get past that specific bone that fractured in his neck. Again, I want to reiterate, it isn't impossible for that to break if someone is hanging themselves. However, the way in which he did it, really that way, I mean, doing it from a bunk bed and kneeling provides enough force to break that particular bone that is already incredibly difficult to break if you hang yourself from a higher, a higher level, I guess.
Yeah, and guys, your neck breaking in a hanging is not unusual, but if you've seen some of those hangings, and we unfortunately had to literally see, or I happen to see the ones after we invaded Iraq and captured some of their top level officials, the thing goes out from underneath you and you have a giant fall, right? And at that point, your neck breaks. Now, could your neck break from the top of a bunk bed? It could, and many bones in his neck broke. But the one we're talking about is the hyoid bone, which is actually in the front and is almost always a sign of strangulation when that breaks rather than a suicide. But yes, in some studies 6%, in some studies 24% of the time in hangings, that one happens to break as well. So look, I don't know what I had it at, 50-50, I really didn't know. But Barbara Sampson saying that it's a suicide does actually lean me more towards thinking that it's a suicide. So I don't know if we'll ever get more information than that. I don't know if we'll ever get to see the videotapes or trust that they actually are the videotapes from that moment in the hallways. But if they weren't trying to get him to commit suicide, they had a funny way of showing it.
I don't think the theories are gonna die out.
No, definitely not. I mean, for me, this medical examiner's report made me more suspicious. But maybe you have a different interpretation.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.